Well, hello, everybody. You've got me this week introducing you. So our presenter is Kim Singer. But before I introduce Kim, I just want to thank the IAS, as usual. They are the sponsors of all our SEDS online activities, including our webinars, our coffee breaks, and the conferences we host as well. So before I get started, I'll just give you some little bit of background on Kim. Kim did his undergraduate in Dunedin in New Zealand. He then moved on to Tromsø in Norway to do his master's. Spent a few years then working in industry in the hydrocarbon sector before returning to academia to a PhD in Bergen. His PhD was looking at CO2 storage in Svalbard, and since when was it? Since 2015, Kim's been based in Svalbard as an associate professor, and he's going to be talking to us today, telling us all about the Svalbox concept, an Arctic geoscientific portal. So the floor is yours, Kim.
Thanks a lot, Stephen, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Today I'm going to sit here in Svalbard and I'll talk to you about Svalbox. But first, I'd like to just introduce the contributors here on the Svalbox team. We have a core team, which is a bunch of PhD students and a couple of us here at UNIS working on Svalbox on the day-to-day. But there's also a lot of contributors who contribute data when they're out in their field, which are master students, bachelor students, postdocs, assistants. Also partner universities. Before we get into the what is Svalbox, I'd like to just show you a video. You can watch this video also on YouTube at your leisure, but it shows a little bit what kind of environment we are dealing with here. So let me show you 2 minutes of Arctic basins fieldwork.
Have you ever wanted to become tomorrow's expert in Arctic geosciences? The Arctic Geology Department at the University Center in Longyearbyen, Svalbard, is the place for you to start your adventure. Here at UNIS, we offer full semester bachelor courses as well as intensive courses at master and PhD level. These courses focus on a variety of topics within geoscience, where amongst others you can study glaciology, permafrost, quaternary geology, sedimentology, and structural geology. Besides the teaching component, all courses include field and laboratory work. Field activities often take place in remote areas throughout Svalbard. Through UNIS, you will have the opportunity to study geoscience, visit stunning and unusual locations where you may encounter some of Svalbard's unique wildlife.
Accessing Svalbard's outcrops in summer is usually an adventure in itself. We normally depart Longyearbyen by sea using ribs called polar circles to access our outcrops. And more recently, we've started using sailboat for more extended field campaigns, whilst larger courses or expeditions can use bigger research vessels. Depending on the stratigraphy that you are working on, accessing an outcrop can be anything from a 5-meter walk across a beach to a 10-kilometer hike through varied and challenging terrain that sometimes may even require a river crossing. Once at the outcrop, as geologists we engage in a wide range of activities. For many it's contemporary geological observations, such as taking structural measurements or recovering sedimentological data, taking samples, or just doing basic mapping studies. In addition, many parts of Svalbard's stratigraphy is quite rich with marine and terrestrial fossils, so there are good opportunities to find some really beautiful specimens. More recently, we have focused on outcrop digitalization, where we've been able to collect 3D models from mountain scale right down to cliff sections using drone photogrammetry. In addition, we also conduct more advanced types of fieldwork and have begun integrating geophysical methods such as ground penetrating radar or electrical resistivity tomography to collect data that can be integrated with our drone photogrammetry models and more classic geological observations.
So this gives you, of course, a little bit opportunity to be jealous for us to be able to work here, but also it allows us to kind of introduce the Svalbox concept. And the Svalbox concept for us is to make these outcrops available also for the wider audience and for us during the long dark season. So this is the building I'm sitting in right now. It's the biggest building in Svalbard, Science Park. It's also the Svalbard Museum here. You can do a virtual field trip from this building to one of the key sites at Festningen by scanning this QR code here. We'll take you there. Now the sun has returned after quite many months of darkness. Just an example of a photo from Unis in middle of November around midday. So there we have a proper polar night up here. Just to get us on the same page, what are we going to spend next half an hour or so about? Where and what is Svalbard? What's Svalbox? How do we digitize the outcrops and how do we share this? How can you access them? And some highlights on Svalbox and look ahead what we're doing right now. First one is quite easy. We are about halfway between North Pole and Oslo. It's about 3-hour flight from Oslo. Usually not too expensive either, but we're also within skiing distance of the North Pole. A colleague of mine once came on skis all the way to Longyearbyen. And Unis, which is the university, established in 1993, is sitting right here on the edge of this yellow on the geologic map, and that's not a coincidence. That's because around the edge of this yellow, all the settlements on Svalbard are located. Why? Well, because this yellow is the central tertiary basin, and at the base of that is the coal, and the coal was more or less forming the base of all sorts of human activities up here, at least the last 100 years. Geologically speaking, we have about 500 million years plus of Earth's evolution. As you see on the map, 60% of the glacier is of the archipelago is covered by glaciers, but many of these are actually receding, so we're getting new and new outcrops every year. We have examples of compressional tectonics, notably here in West Spitsbergen, but also extensional, such as here the Billefjord Trough, classic example, and strike slip up at Forlandsundet. We have many different lithologies, old red sandstones, carbonate platforms, organic rich shales, sandstones, carbonates. My favorite ones are these early Cretaceous igneous rocks related to the Halib. And we have data. So there was actually some petroleum and research drilling conducted. The petroleum exploration onshore Svalbard was started in the 1960s, went on to the early 1990s, and actually predates much of the exploration in the Norwegian continental shelf. And these data, these boreholes provide us some quite key data. Just an example of the deepest borehole, drilled in 1965 by American company Caltex, here at the middle part of the yellow basin. And what's Svalbox? Svalbox is a little bit of everything, but it really started as a database of digital outcrop models from Svalbard. So we are not a global database. Of course, we could do this for anywhere, but we are really Svalbard focused. And the reason for that is we don't just want to present the models themselves, but we want to present them in context. We want to integrate the models with the regional geology. So we have, for example, loaded a lot of paleogeographic maps, sedimentary logs, maps, geophysical data from Svalbard into Svalbox. And then we use it in education, we use it in research, and various data handling tools. We are not developing anything. That's important to point out. We never will develop software. We are on Svalbard. We're going to go out and look at the rocks and enjoy this. We are not going to be a software development company, but we do look around what's available on the market, both from industry and from academia and open source. We started in 2016, was as a teaching tool, but we're really snowballing and developing into much more research innovation tool. We do, for example, 3D printing of outcrops. We have this kind of innovation of integrating different IDs. We are trying to visualize data on 3D outcrops and so on. One of the motivations for Svalbox was, as I told you before, to share this Svalbard geology with everybody not sitting on Svalbard. I think that's a valid point in itself. But we also have to be a bit pragmatic, because for us, the outcrops in the videos, yes, we can access it, but maybe 2-3 months of the year in the summer field season. But when we are teaching, for example, now I'm teaching a methods course in geology to bachelor students from around the world, started in January and we're ending in early June. I cannot take them to the outcrops. Well, I do. I know some outcrops I can take, but it's quite some which are snow covered. So really, it was this extension of the field season by incorporating outcrops acquired in the summertime in our processes that which make it feasible. Just an example, this is a summer field campaign in actually in midnight. We are looking at the reservoir for the CO2 project here, working with drones, digitizing it. This is an outcrop of a seismic scale outcrop at the western Spitsbergen, where we normally run with the snowmobiles to the localities and maybe we do some sketches, but you see there's still some snow cover. There's another video. I'm not going to show it to you, but you have the PDF afterwards. You can click the link and see also how this course runs. I'd just like to point out the course started running in 2017, the AG222. And this is the temperature during the course period. This is the snow depth. And this is daylight hours from 0 to 24 hours. This is not something I can talk to you about. This is something you have to experience, because we are in the coldest period of the year. We are the most snow cover, but we also go from 0 daylight hours to 24 daylight hours within a space of a month or so. And then, of course, these outcrop models are quite important. This is an example. Some of you may recognize it. It's the Festningen sandstone on the back of Janusfjellet here in Longyearbyen. And it's essentially what it is. It's a georeferenced 3D model of an outcrop, process using photogrammetry, structure for motion with the drone. It's quite nice structures here. We process our data in meta shape, and this can size-wise, it can be anything from a hand sample to several kilometer sample. This particular model was made using 79 images. So the Svalbox concept itself, so it's all about data. It's about acquiring data, integrating data, visualizing it, and managing them. There are two components. There's this Svalbox webpage, call it Explore and Acquire. This is completely open for anybody around, doesn't matter where. It's based on GIS. And then we have a more or less in-house and for partner projects, Svalbox Integrate component, where we actually use this industry software called Petrel to integrate even more data, which is not feasible to do in a kind of completely open access fashion. So let me show you examples of both of them. Starting with the Integrate data sets, there we have surface data, stratigraphic logs, for example, from one of the geoscience atlas or from publications, GPS tracks, seismic data. Just an example of a screenshot of a Petrel project which students are provided. There's a paleogeographic maps which are georeferenced. There's some well data, type sections, published profiles, of course, terrain models and seismic data as it is. What's the beauty of that? Well, any data which has an XYZ position, we can kind of have in the same data package. So this case, you see, for example, the southern part of Spitsbergen around Hornsund, where we have also the published cross sections. We have the terrain model with the geologic map draped on top of that. There's also regional data, and you can click on and click off. This relies on having the Petrel platform, which is freely available in academia, but you need some training to be able to use it. Of course, there's also topographic and satellite imagery streamed on that. If you're interested in knowing more about this, there's a video for 10 minutes about what the data is integrated there. And then, and this is perhaps the most important for you guys, because you don't need to use Petrel to use Svalbox. Then we have this web interface. Just go to svalbox.no and map, and you see digital outcrop models. You can also set the satellite images. You can look at the geologic map, which is streamed in. There's some boreholes. You click on them, it tells you some examples. So this is the research boreholes here from the CO2 lab, some petroleum exploration boreholes, and there's also Val's borehole across the Permian-Triassic boundary here. Sedimentary logs, which are published in the Dalman lithostratigraphic lexicon, so their locations are included. We also started to add a lot of 360 images, which are not, they are giving quite a nice overview of the geologic unit without doing too much quantitative work on them. And there's also seismic coverage, so quite a lot of academic and industry seismic. So we're not sharing the seismic, but at least you see the location of the lines, and it's easy to kind of dig them out and look at them in the Petrel part. And we do go out every year to collect more data. Last year, we sent out a team of 4 people to Van Mien and Van Keulenfjorden. It was about a 10-day trip based on a sailboat, so it's easy to charge drones. And it sort of illustrates a little bit how we go about collecting data systematically. This is Axeloya in Van Mienfjorden, quite a famous locality. It's not a protected geotope like Festningen, but it's quite good. Again, 4 people working in 2s and 2s with 2 drones or as one group, going around, flying the drone, acquiring a lot of images of it, of course, watching out for polar bears. Because we are staying on the sailboat, we can charge the drone batteries, but we're also safe from the polar bears and relatively flexible. The stick which Rafael had on the red stick, it's a 360 camera, so we can take images from the drone, but also from the shore to make virtual field trips and excursions. And then we use, this was one of the people from the boat, get us landed with the Zodiac, and then can go out and about. I'm myself from Czech Republic, so I think it's quite funny that there's a Czech research vessel here based in Longyearbyen, which actually is our base, even though we are kind of a landlocked country. So you see the guys are going up the Axeloya, where you have quite nice Permian spiculites. You also have some Triassic shales exposed. Again, it's off-the-shelf drones. We're using this Mavic 2 Pro most of the time. It works really well, very good range. We are happy with that. We had some issues with some other drones, which failed a little bit. I see at the end of the day, they are getting picked up. Could be day, could be night. And this year we are doing exactly the same thing, but in a little bit different area. This is a map of the outcrop models in Svalbox. Right now, I have to actually update it almost every day because there are new models coming online quite regularly. We have a research assistant now adding processing models and adding it to the database. So these were from that campaign I just showed you the video of, including these famous localities in Storvola and Prognafjellet, where the clinoforms are filling the tertiary basin from the west. Here's the same data just with the geologic map. So these are added. And this is what I'm a bit kind of what separates Svalbox from other repositories of digital outcrops, because there are quite some out there, some global ones, really useful stuff. So what we try to do here, we put the models in context. So on the map, for example, this model I showed you before, you can see just from geologic map that you are within the Cretaceous units, partly within the Jurassic. What are the lithologies? What's mapped there? And then you have the model. And another thing which separates us from normal repositories where you can visualize models and maybe use it in your teaching is that all the models you see on the Svalbox, you can also download. And it's not just the models you download, it's the entire Agisoft project. So all the input photographs from the drones, all the Agisoft projects, the processed models. You just click on this DOI, take you to a data repository, Zenodo. There's the DOI, and you just click download. Easy as that. If you reprocess it, there's a new version. Only thing we ask is that people actually then cite the data science data itself when they are using the projects. And on Zenodo, you can also then click this link, and it takes you back to the website where you can visualize it. So it's really to liberate and make it as accessible as possible. One example here is actually something we acquired with Sverre Planken and Valso throughout last year. We were out during COVID. Well, it was not last year, it was the year before, but COVID year. There is the geotope at Festningen, geotope, all the way from Carboniferous. Here's the Permian-Triassic boundary, and then all the way here's the Cretaceous and Paleogene section. So we actually flew the drone more or less along the entire section, took a picture roughly every 5 meters, ended up with almost 4,000 photographs, processed this into a model. You can see the model now on v3geo, which is a quite nice global database of outcrop. You see it on Svalbox. You can download the model. There's a new paper about that, just came out last week. So you can also on the DOI click that, you can download the model. There's videos, there's story maps, kind of story building based on the geology. Another highlight of Svalbox is this integration. I think this can be quite relevant for many sedimentologists because you see something in an outcrop. In this case, it's paleokarst breccia at Fortet in a part of Billefjorden. But you ask yourself, okay, what happens further on? And of course, maybe what you can do, you can put some drillings, shallow drillings. This is not something we can do in-house at the moment, but we have this GPR. And GPR, in this case, ground penetrating radar, can actually show that you have these dipping layers here, which we also see in the outcrop, and then you have chaotic zone, which is the paleokarst breccias. You have another kind of faces here, and these outcrops can really extend our, or this data can extend our viewing beyond the outcrop. This is an example from Julian. It was his master thesis was essentially about this, and then he wrote up a paper based on his master thesis as well. Another applied aspect of using these digital outcrop models is from another master thesis from Christine Larsen. Now she's at Equinor, and she was looking at this Kapstarost information and mapping out fracture systems, doing sedimentary logs and fracture systems to develop a kind of a fracture digital fracture network model for that, and then doing phases petrophysical modeling and upscaling it for example, fluid flow simulations. I'll stop before we get to the fluid flow simulations, but the kind of model is there, and that's largely based on quantitative data of digital outcrops. Another kind of research theme we are following up in many of the lithologies I mentioned is when you look at these kind of seismic scale outcrops, and this is an outcrop of about 5 kilometers length, including my favorite lithology, which are these halep intrusions here. And what we're trying to see is, okay, we know the geometry here. We know more or less the properties of the units in terms of acoustic impedance. So how would this outcrop look like on seismic data? So we use synthetic seismic or seismic modeling, SeisROCs, to essentially identify how the outcrops look like on seismic, what are the detection thresholds, so on. On the smaller scale, we have been digitizing drill cores. This is quite fun. Actually, this is the drill core which we digitized. We have also made 3D prints of this digital core model and did some analysis on that. But it's essentially quite nice because once you have digitized this is a fractured shale succession in the cap rock of the Longyearbyen CO2 lab. And we have a kind of turntable, and we use photogrammetry for that as well. You can actually do some quantitative measurements on that, and you can also unwrap your digital model by this and compare it directly to acoustic televiewer data, which we have from the borehole. Plus, of course, once you've digitized it, maybe several pieces, you can kind of reconstruct the core together, and it's much easier to show a model like this than to send this around the world. Similar concept is applied for fossils, it's applied for hand samples. So we have digitizing quite a lot of samples for various things. It will be useful to have a model of a sample before you run it through a destructive analysis, for example. And we do communicate our kind of result. We had some quite famous visitors not too long ago, or the year before COVID. But this is Iselin Niebuhr. She was the Norwegian, at that time, she was the Norwegian Minister for Education and Research. Now she's in a different job, but she was visiting with the director of UNIS, and here you see her looking at the Skansbukta outcrop in virtual reality goggles. So actually virtual reality we use quite a lot, and we are working with a group in Brazil especially, which have been developing a Moses system so that the students can actually go directly in VR to Festningen and do interpretations on the outcrop while they are really immersed in that environment. Another example of kind of innovation, or kind of trying to see what's possible with off-the-shelf tools, is this little puzzle. So these are 3D printed parts of Svalbard. There's a Festningen this way, east coast that way, so maybe 500 kilometer section, and we have printed them at 1 to 100,000 scale using the digital terrain model from the Polar Institute. And it's one thing to just start putting it together. This is actually high school students which are making a little bit puzzle, discussing where is what, and then we can also project the colors on top of it, so we can project the geological map, for example, on there. And this is really useful for when you're running outreach events or just team building, get people to make these models. And of course we can choose what part of the unit we are printing and what scale and what exaggeration. So it's really useful educational tool as well. So challenges and opportunities of the pandemic. Discussed a bit with Simon before, but it's even before. But we have been hit quite hard, and we had probably the biggest restrictions on travel in Svalbard of all of Europe. You had to do quarantine on mainland before coming up, various tests and whatnot. So for many years we actually didn't have cases, and now everybody has it. But back in mid-March 2020, this UNIS course we had to run fully digitally. So it was a bit paradox that we were here, no COVID and nothing, but we couldn't go into the field. So still, because of Svalbox, we were able to complete it. We kind of make virtual field trips. We made this virtual field trip to the Billefjord Trough, which we would have visited otherwise. Where the students make some of the stops for us. And actually we built on this experience and make thematic trips, for example, to the Festningen profile I showed you before. And there's also some example of us just sharing this experience of digital teaching with the Norwegian geo community. So that was Svalbox, and for a long time we just we are running on small networking projects here and there. But last autumn we got final funding from the Research Council of Norway. It's still a project which is more like networking based. Svalbard Strategic Grant. There's a bunch of mostly international partners who are using Svalbox at their home institutions. But the idea there is to really flood the Svalbox platform with a lot more data. So we had as a goal for the next 3 years to end up with more than 200 models. We are up to almost 200 right now. And so this is very much realistic and on track. we're also going quite actively out to make sure that people are aware what Svalbox is and what it can do for them. Of course, managing a bit data management plan, marketing, publishing papers on this. And then probably more interesting is this integration of data also on the Svalbox webpage. For example, GPR data will be added, maybe some geotiffs. We buy a drone which has a centimeter scale precision, and there we will do time-lapse models. So we're going to look at how the environment around us is changing, also how infrastructure is changing. For example, the runway in Longyearbyen is affected by permafrost freeze-thaw. So we will do surveys of that at regular basis to see if this can be in some way mitigated. We will use virtual reality. And then the last one is actually to use Svalbox as a platform for tying together samples from the Circumarctic on this high Arctic large igneous province. So it's no longer just a teaching tool, but it's also a research tool where you can also have a system to present and share your own, not just data, but also samples. On the innovation side, we try to kind of follow with the trends, benchmark here in the near town area, Arctic conditions, not just structure for motion photogrammetry, but also LiDARs. There is this aspect, there's also LiDARs in the iPhones and iPads. There are, so how useful are they? Are they useful here with digital field notebooks? We're also trying to add as many sensors as we can to the drones and to the digital outcrop models. It can be thermal cameras, it can be multispectral cameras. And I think we are kind of positioning ourselves that if you look at the shift in terms of big data, machine learning in geosciences, Svalbox is there. There's a lot of data there to be used by whoever is interested. We are not the experts on this, but we're of course providing the data for that. And we do support ongoing projects, both on CCS, paleocast, and also deep time paleoclimate efforts. So a little bit small summary, but we are an innovation hub. This is a small version of the figure I showed before, but we are explorers. We are continuously, especially in summer, just out there acquiring new data, especially DOMs, 360 imagery and video and geophysical data, plus samples, field observations. Then we integrate it by its location. So it's geospatial. This is what's the main criteria. Where is the data from? Second question is, what is it? But where is it from? This includes surface, subsurface data, but also, for example, linking geophysics with the DOMs and with samples. And we have fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data, or FAIR principles. It's quite important for us that the data we collect, that we actually make available to the society, which I think is quite unique. I don't think anybody else does this, at least not in the way we are really throwing out everything. We try to use open access solutions and share scripts where feasible. Outreach-wise, we build stories around some of the virtual outcrops models. These are these virtual field trips. We do 3D printing and render GIS data. And we have kind of, actually on Twitter, we are quite active because we have automatic script which throws out a model of the day on Twitter every day. So you can follow that if you're interested, but also go to partner institutions and in universities. And we educate. This is now, of course, we are using it actively in UNIS courses, but can easily be adopted at partner universities, online, to the industry, to different groups, or as part of research projects. There is some papers. As already mentioned, the video, this video you've seen. There is also this video on the Svalbox YouTube channel. And there's a paper, again, it's on Svalbox webpage, or you can contact me or the Svalbox Gmail about that. There's a paper about using these iPads as a digital field notebook in the field, in the Arctic conditions. So actually, just last week, I was teaching the students how to use it, and we had a one-day excursion to familiarize ourselves with it. And there's also opportunities and challenges published here. So with that, I'd like to kind of thank you for your attention, open up for any questions, and I really hope that some of you want to have the chance and you come up to Svalbard at some point also in person. Until you come up in person, you can of course come up digitally by using the Svalbox portal.
Well, thank you, Kim. That was excellent. Thank you very much. I certainly learned a lot, and it brought back many happy memories of my time up there, what, 20 plus years ago. Nice to see things haven't really changed, at least in that part of the world. Maybe the permafrost has actually, but the rest looks very similar. Right, everybody, the chat is open, so please do ask your questions for Kim, and I'm sure, Kim, you'll be getting emails afterwards as well when people are watching the recording of this from SEDS Online. But if I may, I'm going to start off the questioning. One thing, when I was watching this, it was reminding me, it was digital, and obviously you've got these fantastic facility to ground truth your digital. Do you think there are any learners applications here to something that could be applied off planet? And you know what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking you're flying your drones around, your DJI drones around Svalbard. Are there applications here to compare this to the integrity drone images that are beginning to come in from Mars and maybe future Mars missions? Do you think this is a way forward?
Absolutely, and very topical. There was just today at UNIS a French-German research team giving a seminar about, they were here for a few weeks to test some equipment for a Mars mission. And there was a NASA's Mars mission where up here in this part of the world, in the Devonian Basin, there was actually some time ago they were using it quite a lot. And I mean, we are happy to provide and test any kind of equipment and provide the data. And if it's remote sensing. Anyway, if you do it on Svalbard, if you do it on Mars, it doesn't really matter, except maybe the operator is sitting a bit further away on another planet.
Terrific.
But it's certainly a playground, not just for us. It can be anywhere.
Terrific, thank you. I see that Val's asked a question. So Valentin, watching from RWTH, still amazing to see how much data you've managed to put together into this database. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with this one. You can't share these seismic lines directly, but are these seismic lines available somewhere?
Yeah, so seismic we have in the Petrel part of the project. So this is all preloaded here at UNIS internally. Of course, it's not our data. So we cannot just throw it out on the internet, but at least we show the positions. And for published lines, because quite many profiles have been published in a paper or not, we are trying to get at least the geotiffs out, so that people have an idea of where is the seismic and what are the published lines. A little bit like geofacets from AAPG, that kind of format.
Okay, thank you very much. Are they available on the Norwegian Oil Directorate website? I think that's Val again.
Well, no, sorry, Val, this is the problem. So just to make it clear, this Norwegian Oil Directorate and PD, they have a fantastic database of well data and seismic data. It's called Discos. The problem is the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate has no mandate on Svalbard. So data in Svalbard are not part of Discos, and nobody takes care of them. So we kind of stepped up and did what we can to at least prevent it from being lost forever.
Terrific. Well, thank you on behalf of everybody. I've got another question while we're waiting for other people. You mentioned quite briefly 3D printing core. This sort of intrigues me. Could you sort of expand on that a little bit for me? I've not heard of people 3D print. In my head, I'm seeing just a parallel, you know, a barrel.
Yeah. No, so I mean, the idea is that when you digitize a core like this one, you have a 3D model of that, or if you have a 3D model of an outcrop, I have a 3D model here, it's the book cliffs, and so you can 3D print models like this, and then you have a version of that, and sometimes it's easier to, you know, look at the perspective, for example, if it's a major structure. With the course, it's a bit different, because the idea is if you have a, for example, you took a 10 centimeter core to run a lab analysis on CO2 injection, and maybe it doesn't come back to you, maybe it's destroyed during the thing. So you can actually make a 3D image and you can print it, you can put it in the core box, so at least you know what was there before.
Wow. So do these 3D printed cores actually have in basic porosity and permeability characteristics? No. So they are just the external.
Exactly.
Right.
Just
okay.
external.
That's where I was curious. If you managed to pull that off, that would be something.
Yeah. Next, maybe in some decades, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in the future, hopefully something like that, some kind of replicator. But no, that would be terrific. Val, again, are you using the 3D printed items for outreach only, or are you actually using them for the teaching?
Yeah, also teaching, both. So we have one of the things when we start a course, the students get again this puzzle, and then they kind of put it together. They can also, because in my course, the students are making their virtual field trips. I tell them a location, and then they use Svalbox, and they make a lot of research on what's been done in that area, what's interesting, and then they kind of pull it all together in a virtual field trip, which they present. But also they get a chance to tell me, I kind of tell them I'm going to 3D print something for them. They just have to tell me what resolution they want it, and what exaggeration and what spatial coverage, and then they can draw on some features or whatever. So it's both outreach and research. It's not so much for science so far, but I mean, you could. There are really good stuff, even on internet. For example, just throw up. For example, this fault models, just download from internet, so you can look at sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, and have them moving around. I have polar bears, I have giraffes, so it's many things you can print.
Val's comment is, that's so cool. I agree with you, Val. I had one other question for myself. Obviously there's a lot of papers that have come out of this work. Maybe you mentioned a number, but I didn't catch it. Sort of how many papers have come out of this?
I think about Svalbox and different elements, we are into 3-4 papers in total, just on Svalbox. But if we are looking at, okay, what are the Svalbox affiliated papers, for example, these master theses which have integrated data, it's probably another amount of the same.
Okay.
So,
but in the future, can you see more people actually using this data using Svalbox as a data resource to actually produce scientific papers that are not about Svalbox, but utilizing Svalbox? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think for that, it's a very good point. I think there is no paper so far, but on the other hand, is then other stuff to put things out. We only started last summer.
Yeah.
So, and this is also part of this big networking project now, that people are aware of that, and we will have a poster at big conferences and get people to be familiar with it, and then kind of get the data and harvest data and see what people come out. So we are kind of interested and keen to see what people will use it for and what are their experiences as well. So.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm laughing because another one's just popped up from Val. Sorry to monopolize the questions, but there is another one. Have you been approached by other people, institutions, to do something similar to Svalbox, obviously in a different setting?
Indirectly, yes, but mostly it's because of friends or past students. One was actually from Estonia. He wanted to do Estbox or Estonian box or whatever, which is fine. And I mean, everything we do can be applied somewhere else. Most of these things are quite standard off the shelf. We're happy to share scripts. But the one which is most concrete is actually a PhD student who was one of the first students in the AG222 course, who is now applying the same in a PhD on the Faroe Islands. So it's actually, there will be a kind of a Faroe box equivalent made by a PhD student called Rakul Johannessen. So she's actually, and she already did it for her master thesis. She integrated a lot of things from Faroes together in a single project, and she will kind of continue doing that now, partly with the University of Oslo involved as well. So the concept itself, it's not patented in any way or whatever. So if it inspires others to do something, it's all the best. I mean, why not?
And that's fabulous. I mean, sort of building on that, what comes to mind? I mean, obviously, when you initially set up your Svalbox or your Faroebox or S-box or whatever, you define your boundaries. Can you expand those boundaries in future? Can you sort of push Svalbox south and start taking in Norway, and can we be able to join these boxes together? Is that something that could happen in the future?
I think certainly we could. I mean, just to illustrate, this is Svalbox itself. We're quite proud last year because we have last week, because we added a model here from Bjørnøya, which is, I mean, it's part of Svalbard, but it's quite far away. And I mean, I never been to Bjørnøya myself, and here we have this fantastic model added from a PhD students. And of course the map itself, I mean, it could be the world, but so it's no problem to add the Utah outcrop or add the Norway outcrop, whatever. But I think what's important for us is that there are other global repositories who are really global, and you can search on lithology, age, whatnot. But for us, it's important that these models are in the context. So I think as soon as you start expanding elsewhere, you'll have a different amount of base maps. Where are the base maps coming from? How much do you understand the geology? We have quite good control on Svalbard, but as soon as you start expanding, I think it can easily get a bit diffuse.
Yes, I can imagine. It's quite interesting there, because there you're showing us the model working live, and the rendering on that was fabulously fast. Is that because you're very close to the actual server, or are we going to see similar rendering speeds on manipulating the model if I'm doing it from here in the UK?
Yeah, I think it should be exactly the same. Because all this data we don't have in-house. All our data, it's in the visualization, just Svalbard in Sketchfab, which is some server, and then the repository where you download the files. Then they are big; they are like a few gigabytes. But this is on the CERN repository, Zenodo. So we actually, I think it was a big step change for us. Initially, we had the models here, but we quickly realized we would run out of space and had to update space all the time.
Yeah.
Then we figured, okay, let's use a repository instead for storing the data.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll let you go. I don't know what time it is there in Svalbard. But we'll let you go. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming along today, but particularly, yes, we're getting a round of applause there. But thank you very much, Kim. And thank you everybody else for coming. This will be available online soon, as usual. Please go and look at all our recordings. We're many recordings. I think we're over 100 different webinars are now on the Studs Online website. Next week, it's not on the website yet because we've only found out today. We've got confirmation on next week's speakers. Very last minute change of speaker. It's going to be Gregor Eberle from University of Miami. So we're moving from almost the North Pole right down to Miami. Quite a changing climate. So next week, Gregor Eberle. But again, thank you very much, Kim.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and thanks everybody. Have a good day.